I'd like to welcome everyone. We're glad that you're joining us today for the DEI grantee training from our role of the Disability Resource Coordinator, or DRC series. I'm Laura Glenick with the NDI Technical Assistance Team, and I'm joined today by our guest presenters, my colleagues, Miranda Kennedy and Brian Ingram. Today's presentation represents the third in an ongoing series targeted to all Disability Resource Coordinators, their DEI project leads, and DEI local level support staff in all rounds of DEI projects. And on today's presentation in particular, we hope that local level leadership from the workforce system is joining us, as we will be covering information that will really be of great interest to leadership for action planning around WIOA implementation. And here's a lovely picture of me, and now we're going to go to the learning objectives. So during today's presentation, my colleagues, Miranda and Brian, will discuss the potential role of DRCs related to the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, also known as WIOA. And as a result of today's presentation, you're going to walk away with, one, an understanding of your potential role as a Disability Resource Coordinator in supporting the career centers and implementing WIOA with a focus on serving job seekers with disabilities. Two, examples of systems-level opportunities that DRCs can pursue related to DEI intervention strategies being utilized in WIOA among career centers and partner agencies. Number three, information on how you as a DRC can use the integrated resource team approach and your workforce employment network as vehicles to meet long-term employment goals beyond career centers and vocational rehabilitation. And that's key. And then finally, questions for you as the DRC and your local area to consider as you move forward. I will now turn the presentation over to my colleague, Miranda, to start things off by sharing with you how she and Brian are going to help you achieve the learning objectives during this presentation. So Miranda, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Laura, and thank you everyone for joining us here today. We're happy you're here. Laura just covered what we're hoping you're going to be taking away from today's discussion, but let's talk about kind of the structure of what we're going to be talking about here today with the agenda in front of you. So I'm just going to walk through this with us, and this is really from the perspective of the Disability Resource Coordinator. So first off, we're going to be starting off talking about why am I here? Why is the DRC here? So what is the mission of the DEI and the DRC, and how is this relevant to the rapidly changing service delivery environment at the American Job Center? Next, we're going to be talking about what's going on around you as the DRC. There's a lot going on right now. What changes are happening in the job centers and why? It's inherent in our title, too. That's a hint. Next up, we'll be talking about what am I going to do about it? So what is the DRC are you going to be doing? How can you implement the mission of the DEI in an uncertain and changing environment in the career centers? And finally, how will your actions affect others? What opportunities might exist for systems change in a period of systems transition? Additionally, what challenges might exist? So our plan is to have a fairly high-level discussion here today because, for one thing, we're all still living our way into better understanding the potential role of the DRC related to WIOA. The details around all of this we're figuring out as we go, but we hope today's training will give us a good jumping off point from which to have some meaningful local level discussions and provide ideas for action planning and forward movement. You know, in many ways, this new landscape with WIOA provides opportunities for the DEI and DRC to capitalize upon. So with that, let's go ahead and move forward. So we felt it was important and helpful to kick off our training talking about the DRC, WIOA, and situational awareness. We all hopefully know by now who the DRC is and the function this key position plays in the Career Center, increasing access for job seekers with disabilities. Additionally, we're all very much in the learning mode about WIOA. So what is situational awareness, and how does that figure into our discussion? If we have any veterans in the audience, you're probably a few steps ahead of us, as this term is borrowed from the military. Situational awareness boils down to paying attention to what is going on around you. How's that for practical and simple? We did say we wanted this to be high level. So in terms of what we're going to be talking about, it's more than that, though. It's the ability of the DRC, of you as the DRC, to scan your local workforce development environment with a special focus on the opportunities within WIOA, and from that information, identifying challenges and opportunities for job seekers with disabilities. We then need to take this information and align it with the need to maintain and even evolve your role as a DRC, promoting and incorporating the DEI intervention strategies into the new workforce WIOA environment within the Career Center's customer flow and the flow and outcomes of the Career Center's partners and the business community. So let's look again at those 4 questions for you as DRCs. These really are the 4 central questions to situational awareness that we're going to be exploring related to your role in this new world. So why am I here? What's going on around me? What am I going to do about it? And how will my actions affect others? Well, as far as why you're here, we hope you know this by now, but our first question for you as DRCs to consider that, why am I here? Well, I have to say, as your training and TA team, we promise we aren't trying to trigger an existential crisis for our DRCs on the line by posing this question. Instead, we wanted to start with this basic building block question. Why is the DRC in the Career Center? Because in order to understand the new environment in which you're operating, it's important to start by revisiting why you're in the Career Center in the first place and how you fit into the picture of the Career Center's services, programs, and partners. What it really all boils down to is that your role is to increase access for job seekers with disabilities to the existing array of services, supports, and employment programs available at the Career Center and among the Job Center partners. Additionally, you're there to increase the quality and quantity of meaningful and sustainable employment outcomes of job seekers with disabilities. Well, how do you do that? The DRC, as you know, achieves these goals by implementing the DEI intervention strategies. I'm going to touch base on each of those for just a minute here. But what we have here for our strategies are the 5 on the screen: integrated resource teams, partnership and collaboration, increasing participation in the Ticket to Work program, asset development strategies, and customized employment and self-employment. So starting out with that first bullet, as part of the IRT, you, the DRC, will have already helped to build an understanding within the workforce system about the benefits of the IRT model. In your role, you may have taken on an active part in assisting customers with resource coordination that precedes the IRT, and that can involve helping a customer create a goal-specific resource plan, directly assisting a customer to convene and negotiate with multiple service providers to create an employment plan that accesses needed resources from multiple service systems. Additionally, directly assisting a customer to implement and monitor the employment plan and making adjustments as needed. And as many DRCs have done, you've facilitated, you served in that facilitator role in the IRT where you've modeled the practice for staff and partners. So that could be including helping Job Center staff to explain the benefits of utilizing the IRT approach to job seekers, working with your staff and job seekers to identify and reach out to other providers who can be a part of that IRT, and of course facilitating or leading that first IRT meeting and modeling how to establish that common employment goal, the sequence of service, and also the lines of communication around that mutual customer that the partners are coming together for. And that all really leads us into that second bullet about partnership and collaboration. Because as a DRC, your role related to that is really to improve coordination and collaboration among employment and training and asset development programs implemented at local levels. That also includes the Ticket to Work program. And to build effective community partnerships that really leverage those public and private resources to better serve individuals with disabilities and improve employment outcomes. You know, our third bullet here, covered last month in our training on the role of the DRC related to the Workforce Employment Network. You know, increasing participation in the Ticket to Work program. Your role as a DRC really can include a lot of things that we covered last month, and just a few of them here. You know, supporting the service team and that integration of EN operations into the customer service flow of the Career Center. Training leadership and Job Center staff in areas relevant to including people with disabilities and services. Connecting beneficiaries to disability benefits planning services, and facilitating collaborative guidance for your local employment network operation. There are many other things you could be doing, you know, identifying and engaging new partners, using the service strategies of the DEI, performing that outreach internally and externally, you know, coordinating with your state lead and around ticket assignment and service and documentation requirements. There's a lot to that. I hope you all have participated in that last presentation we did. This all does align back with what we're talking about here with WIOA. Our fourth intervention strategy, you know, asset development is something, I'll give you a heads up, we're going to be covering in depth in our next training in the role of the DRC training series. We're going to be talking about the role of the DRC related to asset development. That'll be coming at the end of August, so stay tuned for that. You know, and finally, you know, customized employment and self-employment. There are a lot of things as a DRC you can be doing around that, identifying and mapping community resources available to support those objectives, helping the Job Center partners connect with local small business development centers and Voc Rehab to offer these types of employment options, and making sure materials and information around this is available in the Career Center, and making those introductions of these types of providers to Job Center staff around the programs, and, you know, providing some in-service training and things along those lines. So that's a lot of what you're covering and doing in your role as the Disability Resource Coordinator. So why are you here? Well, your purpose in the Career Center and the Job Center is not going to change under WIOA. All those things I just covered and really glossed over a lot. You could go much deeper into each of them. But none of that is going to be changing under WIOA. So this is both good news and a good thing to remember as we move forward, which is why we took the time to cover it just now. So with that, in terms of what is going on around you, obviously we're talking about WIOA implementation, and I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Brian to tackle this one. So Brian, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Miranda, and hello, everyone. I am very pleased that you chose to join us today, as always. So, as Miranda was so nicely leading into, let's take a moment to think about the second question on our list. What's going on around me? And as the shark looming behind the happy divers in the slide so clearly shows, the answer is a lot. WIOA implementation is going to change the way all of the systems covered in the legislation do business. Wagner-Pizer, workforce, VR, and education, all of them. So this is both a particularly fascinating and frustrating moment to be a part of, because everything's on the table, but nothing's decided. Now, as Miranda mentioned, even though there can be no detailed answers to the programmatic questions so relevant to our projects that are on our minds, there are definitely some general themes we can clearly identify as being central to implementation, and some things going on right now around you that are going to define the post-implementation environment. So let's move forward by looking at some quotes from the legislation or DOL comments on it to see if we can determine what these changes could mean to the DEI. Okay, now this is a clarification of WIOA Section 188. It's a section that should be familiar to DRCs from WIA, which had a very similar section of the same number. So let's read this Q&A really quick. How are one-stop centers and one-stop delivery systems certified for effectiveness, physical and programmatic accessibility, and continuous improvement? Answer point 6 is they must include evaluations of how well the one-stop center ensures equal opportunity for individuals with disabilities to participate in or benefit from one-stop center services. These evaluations must include criteria evaluating how well the centers and delivery systems take actions to comply with the disability-related regulations implementing WIOA Section 188, et cetera, et cetera. So from this excerpt, we can glean that, like providers who receive WIA funding, WIOA providers will have a set of accessibility standards that will need to be complied with in order to receive WIOA funding. Those of you who, like Miranda and I, had the opportunity to participate with your EOCs around the Section 188 inspection process at a center or regional level as a DRC or navigator know just what this is referring to, right? I hope so. But for those of you who might not have had hands-on experience, let's continue to look at this particular guidance. Okay. According to the NPRM, such actions include but are not limited to 1. Providing reasonable accommodations for individuals with disabilities. Okay, so accommodations are available upon request, right? This is also quite a bit like WIA, but as any DRC knows, this is a deceptively simple statement that refers to a complicated process. It's a process that's unique to each customer, and it's endlessly challenging to apply in a consistent and effective way. That's something to think about, so let's look at 2. Making reasonable modifications to policies, practices, and procedures where necessary to avoid discrimination against persons with disabilities. Now, this statement's beginning to get a little bit more interesting because it specifically states that in order to make services accessible, reasonable modifications may need to be made to policies, practices, and procedures. This one statement could actually be the key to all the others because it defines modification of these things as a request that could be reasonable in order to achieve the other goals. Let's look at number 3, administering programs in the most integrated setting appropriate. So how many times have you as a DRC run into a situation where a customer can't access the outcome of a service, not because they're unable to attain the outcome, but because they can't access the service the way it's usually delivered? That's one. How about number 4? Let's see. Communicating with persons with disabilities as effectively as with others. So I can think of countless times myself that I had to intervene at a center to get somebody the communication support they needed and not just interpreting. I mean, sometimes it had everything to do with the environment or the platform that was being used to present the information. And then there's number 5, providing appropriate auxiliary aids and services, including assistive technology devices and services where necessary to afford the individuals with disabilities an equal opportunity to participate in and enjoy the benefits of the program or activity. So that's the technology piece, right? You know, the centers are going to need to have accommodating technology. They're going to need to be up to date. They're going to need to be, the staff's going to need to be up to speed in how to assist people to use them. And again, that's pretty much like WIA, but it's in there. So let's move on from this slide to the next one, which is my favorite, and I think you're going to see why. Okay, are you ready for this? Here we go. WIOA strengthened the alignment of the Workforce Development System's 6 core programs by imposing unified strategic planning requirements, common performance accountability measures, and requirements governing the one-stop delivery system. In so doing, WIOA placed heightened emphasis on coordination and collaboration at the federal, state, and local levels to ensure a streamlined and coordinated service delivery system for job seekers, including those with disabilities and employers. So let me give you a minute to let that sink in. This is a part of WIOA that is very different than WIA. Wagner-Pizer, Workforce, VR, and Education are going to need to reach consensus around unified strategic planning and common performance and accountability measures. Now, I'm going to say this, although I'm pretty sure many of you are thinking it already, but how many times have you seen roadblocks to services that are encountered by customers with multiple challenges to employment because providers don't communicate with each other, and because the timelines and outcome structures of the different providers don't align. How much of your time as a DRC has been spent struggling with these issues? More than that, how relevant can the DEI service delivery components be toward the development of a service delivery model in which the strategies and the outcomes have to be aligned? So the opportunities for the DEI to affect systems change in this kind of environment could be off the charts. So let's continue this discussion. I'm starting to get warmed up here. Let's move to the next slide. All right. So let's think about the possible role of the DEI and you, the DRC, and WIOA in an environment where there is shared reporting and outcome structure, there's shared planning, service delivery models, and strategic goals, and there's a shared emphasis on targeted demographics. So in that kind of environment, folks, what's the relevance of integrated resource teams? Well, integrated resource teams provide you with a model for partnering across multiple systems in which a key component of is a unified employment goal, right? So it's pretty obvious that integrated resource teams might be pretty useful. Let's look at partnership and collaboration. Well, as a DRC, you've been fostering partnership and collaboration since the day you started, hopefully, and partnership and collaboration is going to be absolutely critical. These systems are going to need to communicate with each other, and they're going to need to coordinate their services. How about workforce ENs? How helpful could that be in such an environment? I mean, at that point, the workforce EN is going to be tacked on with these other service providers if they're sharing partners. And that EN can fill the gaps. It can provide the needed benefits planning services. It can provide retention services. We'll talk more about that later. It fits into the puzzle very, very nicely. What about asset development strategies? Well, we're going to talk about this a little bit more later on too, but in this new environment, retention might be much more important. And there's nothing that is more helpful to job retention than a solid asset development strategy. So that could be incredibly helpful too. And then finally, we have independent learning plans, which we just recently introduced. And that is a strategy that allows for long-term planning that embraces multiple training and placement outcomes. It's also a way to coordinate resources through the timelines of multiple providers. So this could be hugely, hugely relevant as well. And just as we've said in earlier trainings in this series, if the DRC operates in that place where the individual and the systems level meet, then every customer you help using these strategies could have huge systems relevance. Because the DEI is a perfect lab for the development of pilots and procedures under the WIOA. Miranda, it might be time for me to get off this soapbox. I think I might be getting a little overexcited. Do you mind taking the next section?
Well, I'm happy to do so. Thank you, Brian. So we've covered why am I here and what's going on around me. So we're already on our third piece here, which is what am I going to do about it? As a DRC, what are you going to do to maximize upon the opportunity that WIOA presents? Well, we've been alluding to this quite a bit already. So let's walk through this. Some things to consider. As a DRC, how are you going to maximize that opportunity within WIOA? Some thoughts would be to certainly, and we hope that they're with you in the room watching this webinar right now, and you can have a discussion following it. But really, it's very important to share with your local leadership and partners specific examples, case studies of how you've utilized DEI intervention strategies in your local area to partner across systems and serve mutual customers with your partners who've experienced barriers to employment. And telling those stories, those case studies, those examples, what that will really highlight is the data that you'll be able to share. Provide that data on your training and placement outcomes. That's incredibly meaningful. And of course, track and participate when possible in any and all WIOA implementation and transition activities that are taking place in your local area. That's key. So with that, I'll hand it back over to you, Brian, now that you've had an opportunity to take a breath, to talk a little bit about the opportunities for DEI within WIOA. Wow, all these acronyms, right?
I know. We're hoping you guys are following us. There's not much for it. If we actually said all the words associated with the acronyms, we'd be here all day. So yes, I do feel a little better, and I would like to continue. So here's what the DEI project leadership can do about it. You can get on your soapbox. The DEI embodies in so many ways the intent of the new legislation, and it provides resources and strategies that can help states and regions comply with the new demands of their challenging service delivery environment. So model service delivery strategies for all participating systems. Remember, under WIOA, all 6 of those systems become like one. And a model that is going to be useful to them is going to have to meet all their needs. Secondly, participate in small-scale pilots that explore larger WIOA systems issues. We have the resources and the opportunity to do that. That's what the DEI was born for, guys. This might be your opportunity to walk right into some very interesting pilots. Finally, use expertise around multiple systems to develop operational models. So remember, we've been doing this stuff for a long time now. We should have, out in the field, developed relationships with other providers, quite possibly providers under WIOA, and also we have very likely developed strong relationships with them. That can be very, very important as they are convening for the first time to figure out how the heck they're going to do this. So find a way to communicate the relevance of what you're doing as these individual systems begin to work together to create an integrated one. Let me give you an example. Okay. Examples of strategies from round 1 to 5 that could apply to WIOA. So active resource coordination and integrated resource team approach. So, you know, the integrated resource team could have been developed specifically for a group of providers that had to embrace a shared outcome structure. I mean, think about it. Customers with multiple challenges to employment are still going to need the assistance of multiple providers. They're still going to need active resource coordination support to access them, and they're still going to benefit from an IRT meeting. I got to say, I think the IRT is a perfect fit for WIOA. Would you mind taking number 2, Miranda?
Sure. I'll take number 2, which also happens to be another perfect fit. But so in our last training in this series, when we talked about the DRC's role related to the workforce EN, we covered guidance from WIOA that aligns perfectly with the Career Center serving as workforce employment networks under SSA's Ticket to Work program. WIOA calls for an increased emphasis on the inclusion of people with disabilities in the services of the Career Centers. WIOA whips that they establish subcommittees to address disability and employment. The new legislation puts an emphasis on physical and programmatic accessibility to meet center certification, and it requires the inclusion and review of performance for customers that have disabilities. Finally, it puts emphasis on unifying the capacity of the job centers to be responsive to targeted populations. Your workforce employment network, which is a requirement under the DEI, helps meet all of that criteria. So it's another perfect fit for WIOA. So Brian, I'll hand it back over to you to cover our 3rd bullet here.
You know, I'd be happy to cover the 3rd bullet, which of course is asset development strategies. And here's an interesting fact about WIOA placement outcomes that we do know. They're not going to be attained until a customer has been on the job for 2 quarters. That's 6 months. So unless I'm hugely mistaken, I think we're going to see an increased focus on retention in all of the providers under WIOA. So the work we've all been doing around asset development should address this need quite nicely. Also, as career pathway strategies become more of a focus under WIOA, a strategy for longer-term planning that includes multiple training and placement outcomes could be needed. An additional strategy, just by the by, that's being explored right now in the DEI it's not really an official intervention strategy, but it is very promising, is called individual learning plans, right? We had a training on that not too long ago. This is another strategy that could prove really, really important as WIOA is implemented. So opportunities for the DRC position. Just remember, there's a lot of opportunities for you as the DRC in this new environment. Since one of the reasons this is because your position is not bound by service delivery models. You're very, very flexible. And in a changing environment like this, that makes you a very valuable player, or a useful bit, as I like to say. Now, consider that as a DRC, you're also a systems level specialist who can add value to the Career Center as it works to partner across multiple systems around mutual customers, right? This is your bread and butter, guys. This is what you're good at. You've been doing it for a long time, and you know the tricks of the trade. This might just be the moment where the things that you know become vitally important to the system. Okay. As the DRC, you've been assisting the Career Centers in working with customers to access multiple providers all along, guys. WIOA breaks down many of the barriers to the sharing of customers that have historically challenged providers. Under WIOA, it might just be simpler to share a customer than it is to silo them. Perhaps it isn't going to guarantee that all customers are going to be shared, but it has the potential to create an environment in which it is just as advantageous to the providers to share customers as it's always been to the customers themselves. This makes what you do as a DRC, have done, and what you're doing, and what you will do, of course, hugely relevant and important to the birth of this new system. In a very real way, you guys were there first. You've blazed a trail that these systems could now follow if they choose to. Let's look at a quick example of what I'm talking about. How the DEI generally and the DRC specifically could be relevant to helping shared customers across multiple levels of a career pathway. So imagine a customer shared by the WIOA partners, Wagner, Pizer, Voc Rehab, Workforce, and in this case, Career Pathways. Imagine that customer benefiting from the strategies of the DEI. This includes access to career exploration and the development of an independent learning plan to identify a long-term career goal and the steps needed to get there. Add to this active resource coordination and IRT facilitation that use that individual learning plan as a guide to coordinate resources from multiple providers and establish a timeline of services that includes multiple training and placement outcomes, where our job seekers have opportunities clearly identified to help them stay engaged and use that pathway approach to access multiple pathways. It can also include EN services for customers on Social Security disability, especially work incentive counseling and job retention services. Additionally, there can be ongoing asset development support to ensure financial stability throughout the implementation of such a long-term career plan. This could create a sound financial base that could extend beyond that plan and establish a customer firmly in the middle class. Is this ringing any bells? Remember, a DRC does work with that individual and that systems level meet and has been specifically tasked to do the very things that WIOA is about. See every customer you work with as a laboratory. Create examples of successful outcomes, and their importance are going to be hard to deny. Uh-oh. Miranda, I think I might be back on the soapbox. Maybe you should start the next section.
Okay, Brian. Thanks. So yeah, the last section we're on to already. We've covered quite a bit of ground here. But the last section, this is where we tie it all together, and we've been talking about these different pieces. But really, how will the DRC's actions affect others? You should be asking yourself, how will my actions affect others? Those others could be your center staff, partners, job seekers with and without disabilities. And we're looking even beyond the DEI grantee project, but to the larger workforce system too. So let's take a look. as the DRC, and we've been talking about this, your promotion of and the employment outcomes you've already achieved in your local area for job seekers with disabilities can provide a relevant local level model. This isn't some model coming in from the national level or even the state level. It's a local level model that you've developed already for serving job seekers with and without disabilities under WIOA. Many of these strategies will be beneficial to customers who do not have a disability but who have other barriers to employment. This can lead to better collaboration. This local level model you've already been working on, or these activities you can pilot in as we've been talking about, they can lead to better collaboration among partners and more quality employment outcomes for your mutual customers. That's going to be of real interest. You know, you've been implementing the strategies of the DEI, if you have been doing it as defined by the National DEI Program Office and as the training and TA provider has been guiding along the way, then you're going to have examples of your work, activities, and those outcomes that you've achieved. Those outcomes, if their relevance is communicated and understood by the participating systems, could be the bedrock that the WIOA service delivery model is built upon. So, one of the best strategies as part of the WIOA straight from DOL guidance on WIOA, where it states, program coordination standards might also include operational standards such as integrated resource teams, such as those piloted in the Disability Employment Initiative, or other methods are used to jointly fund services to meet the specific needs of individuals. Resource rooms include high-quality, up-to-date information about the services. So we can see here that in DOL's guidance, they specifically cite the work of the DEI, in particular the use of IRTs, recognizing the high level of relevance that our body of work to date has on the emerging trends and hope for outcomes in the larger field. Again, inclusive of individuals with disabilities and also applicable to individuals without disabilities. So the link is right there if you want to delve further into that guidance. So all in all, WIOA is the moving target we need to aim at where it's going and not at where it's been. And this is applicable for all of our earlier rounds in particular. Back to others in your role as a DRC, consider this. In the immediate future, and even, let's say it, right now, very moment in time that we are occupying, you as a DRC have the
Miranda?
Oh, yes.
Miranda?
Did I lose?
Yeah, you're breaking in and out sometimes.
Okay. Laura, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I won't move from this position. I wasn't moving, but let me know. Should I start again at the top of this?
Yes, please.
Okay. And break in if you're losing me. Okay, so when we're contemplating how your actions as a DRC might affect others, please do consider this. In the immediate future, and even right now, at this moment in time, you have the potential to majorly influence how WIOA services are delivered across all participating systems. You're sitting squarely where the individual and systems levels meet, and as an added bonus, you're the person in the position of being specifically tasked with demonstrating strategies that hold huge relevance to the developing WIOA system, as Brian and I have been talking about here. Here I'd like to ask Brian again, as a DRC, what should you routinely ask yourself?
All right, well, let's look at some questions to consider. What do you think? Okay, so here's a question to consider. How do we get the Career Centers, LWIBs, and partners to fully understand and capitalize upon the strategies of the DEI and the potentials of the DRC position? So we know it, we can show it, but who do we show it to, and how do we communicate its relevance? The answers to these questions are going to vary from project to project, region to region, and even center to center. But as a DRC, it's important for you to know who in your system is participating in the WIOA implementation planning, and what is the best way to communicate to them the relevance of the DEI to what they're trying to do. Now, if I were a DRC, I would try to develop a plan of action. And I would start by simply asking my direct supervisor to start with, or my state lead, or even my TA liaison for input to kind of get the ball rolling. So here's another question. So it's a couple of questions. How do you as a DRC present the examples of your work and how it is related to WIOA to your system and the partners at a leadership level? And secondly, how do you as a DRC stay at the forefront of the discussion once you've presented the examples? So thinking about the first one, who needs to know what you've been up to, and how can you get them to, understand and communicate, how can you communicate its relevance to them? For the second one, how can you stay in the loop? As this new system is being developed, how can you be a part of that development? We need you in there to advocate both for universal access generally and those DEI service strategies in particular. And now a final question. How do you, as a DRC, model and assist the coordination of the IRT approach and use independent learning plans, asset development strategies at the individual shared customer level for our systems and our partners? So, I'm going to challenge you guys to ask yourself this question every day. As you drink your coffee at your desk before you start your work in the morning, if you do this, if you keep this in mind, if you think about this in relation to everything else you're doing, good things are going to come of it. So keep those questions in mind, guys. And Miranda, would you care to bring us home?
I would like to bring you home if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right, I'm getting a little paranoid here. Okay, so let's sum it up. We've created a couple of slides that we hope will do just that. Hopefully this information will sound familiar since it's stuff we just covered, but we're trying to make it nice and concise for you here at the end and leave you with some thoughts. So the first example of how a DRC can showcase the DEI to local level leadership working on implementing at the individual level, where a DRC can showcase the service delivery strategies that they've modeled for center staff and partners, and how this has created a community of providers familiar with the DEI practices who've bought into the outcomes they've attained with their shared customers. The individual level is arguably the best in terms of demonstrating the benefits of the DEI strategies and the pivotal role that the DRC can play. An individual story or a number of individual stories can paint the picture of the numbers that you've achieved in an incredibly compelling strategies together, such as the IRT, the workforce EN, asset development strategies, in order to achieve a high-level outcome and transition an individual off of benefits and get them on a path to the middle class. The key here is in the service delivery strategies, that creation of a community of providers and the shared customer. The WIOA is seeking to bring about.
Miranda, it's Laura. You're cutting out again.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. It just intermittently cuts in and out.
I am really sorry, folks. I don't know what the issue is. So really what we're talking about is that, if you're looking at the slide in front of you, hopefully you can see and hear me. And that creation of, those service delivery strategies, the creation of the community of providers and the shared customers, the important thing to know is that that's what WIOA is working. The DRC role has been working towards all along. Now, similar to the individual level work that is being done, but taking that a step further, at the systems level, the DRC can utilize that community of providers and the outcomes they've attained for shared customers as the key to open the door and participate in systems-level discussions taking place around WIOA implementation. The DRC can share customer strategies and outcomes that work at a systems level, such as referrals and resource coordination, joint training and placement and retention planning, development of long-term multiple-stage individual plans, and experience and examples and tools to support all of the above. You know, as the DRC, you're already in the position, as we've mentioned multiple times now throughout the course of today's training, and you may be one of the few or only ones in your area in this position, where you have an operational understanding of multiple partners, which again is key under WIOA. You understand multiple systems eligibility and outcome requirements, their operational procedures, the targeted areas of expertise of different partners, and you have, many of you, am I cutting out again?
You're
okay.
Cutting out again.
Okay.
So
I'm trying to keep my eye on my volume on the screen. Okay, can you hear me now?
yeah, go back a minute.
Go back a minute. Okay, well, I'm covering the information on here about, your shared customer strategies and outcomes, so you can read those for yourself. They'll be on the PowerPoint for you to download. But then I was talking also about, you're in that role where you have the operational understanding of multiple systems. So as we wrap up, around to you. Your staff and partners who have joined the training today, there's so much you've learned or could glean from the work that you've done up to this point to increase access and outcomes for job seekers with disabilities through your local workforce system and with your partners. The questions that I would pose to all of you now, which we would not presume to answer for you, are elements of the DEI do you think might be essential as part of your new state and local model under WIOA? Which elements of the DEI do you think would be supportive as part of your work now? And what role do you think the DRC can play related to these essential or supportive practices with WIOA? And finally, as we end our time together today, how are you going to take the information covered today and turn it into action in your local community? We hope that today's training will provoke some interesting discussions and concrete action in the coming days, weeks, and months. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Who did you turn it over to?
I turned it over to you, Laura.
Okay, so we didn't hear. Okay, so if you go, so let's talk about some resources and supports for DRCs. I just want to say, before we do, a little bit about, it's a new legislation, WIOA, and we've heard a lot about it. There's been a lot of resources and information coming out from the Department of Labor, many webinars that we've been sharing, and people are no doubt in the workforce system wondering what they're going to do and what their role is. I can tell you probably about at the time when we, and that would be the National Training and TA team, and working with the National DEI Program Office, learned about passage of WIOA, the coming passage of WIOA, and what it included were exactly as Brian and Miranda said, we're pretty excited because you, as part of the Disability Employment Initiative, are already part of it. Unbeknownst to you, and maybe unbeknownst to us as well, because we weren't part of writing the legislation, we're really excited about kind of you helped to pave the way. And at the local level and at the state level, that should also be identified and a disability employment initiative, state and project. So in pulling together this webinar, Miranda and Brian worked very closely together and with the other colleagues on the team, and kind of wanted to hopefully, as you walk away from here, understanding the significance of your role and the ease of your role in terms of you've already done it. So you are a great support to the local level. So here's some supports and resources that you can access to help you as you move forward. Peer-to-peer, nothing better than fellow peer mentoring, your fellow DRCs. Right now we have 3 active projects, round 3, 4, and 5, and so tap into them from different states and different local areas. Definitely your state leadership team. From the workforce system, there are also, at the state level, many who are already working very collaboratively with vocational rehabilitation. Certainly your National Technical Assistance Liaison, if you don't know it yet, all of them are from the workforce system and served under the Disability Program Navigator Initiative as navigators, and all of them touch the state level as well. And so they are a good resource, and we are here to support you. The DEI website, both the public but certainly the private side. If you don't have access to the private side, it means you need a login, so make sure you reach out to your TA liaison. We also just came out within the last couple of weeks an updated, I guess you will, Section 188 disability checklist called Your Promising Practices in Achieving Universal Access and Equal Opportunity, a Section 188 disability reference guide. We had the opportunity to work with those who are developing it and share some of the things that were done under the DPN and the DEI best practices that you will see there. So there is a lot to help you as well. We're going to continue, as Miranda alluded to, as we continue through this series on the Disability Resource Coordinator. So I do believe we have some time still left, and we would like to open it up to you and ask you to share your comments and your questions. You can do so by raising your hand, clicking on the raise hand icon, and we can call on you. You can also submit a question in the chat box or the Q&A box, and we'll share it with the team. Remember, this is your opportunity to ask and get more information. We'd also love to hear from people. You know, it doesn't have to be in the form of the question. As you look at WIOA, do you see the connection between your role already? Do you see that the work that you have done naturally lends itself to WIOA? We'd love to hear those thoughts as well. Okay, let me just see. And Miranda, I reminded people that we're going to transfer the PowerPoint at the end of the session. We did get a question, wondered if they'd have access to the notes. We do have a transcript. We have real-time captioning. We will have a transcript, and that will be posted to the website, to the archive, along with the PowerPoint.
Well, and so the file, if you can hear me, should be on the screen in front of you if you can download that directly onto your desktop. The other thing to keep in mind, too, is that at the end of August, be on the lookout early next week on the listserv, on the DEI listserv. You'll be seeing the training dates coming out for our next training in this Role of the DRC training series, where we'll be covering asset development. And you better believe we'll be tying in WIOA.
Well, you might be tying this in. Sinclair Hubbard from Virginia shared a comment saying, I think it is important to promote the employment network retention services provided by DEI projects.
Absolutely. Well, and we'll also be having, we have a number of national level webinars we're looking at presenting in the late fall and early winter, and we'll be covering that in one of those too, to the larger workforce system, Sinclair. But be interested in if you'd be willing to participate with us on that. We might have to call on you.
Mm-hmm. So you don't have to say anything, but I would be curious by a show of hands, how many, boy, how do I want to say this? Just by show of hands, I promise I won't call on you. Do you understand and see the benefit of your role under the implementation of WIOA? Oh, good. Okay, I see hands. Good. Okay.
Well, and we also would love your feedback on the post-training survey as we're ending our time here today. Any feedback you have is very, very useful for all of us, because you are all the ones who are blazing the path in this new age with the workforce system and its partners, and the ability to use these strategies at a higher level and achieve those goals of the DEI. So your feedback is really important to us.
And I have from Ryan, I do see how the DEI project ties in well with WIOA. In light of that, will the DEI team and or Department of Labor be encouraging local WIBs to retain or obtain DRCs? Well, I could start with that. This is Laura. I will say there is going to be another round, a sixth round of DEI projects funded, and that they should be awarded either in late August or September. We do not know if there will be further rounds after this. It always depends on the funding that's part of the Department of Labor. In terms of retaining, that is a good question, Ryan, and that is part of the work that we hope is being done at both the state and local levels within each project, because part of the scope of work is really looking at the sustainability of not only the policies and practices and activities that are being done, but also at sustaining the DRC positions. So that
Laura,
is,
sorry.
No, please go ahead, Brian.
Oh, no, well, this is Brian, and hello, Ryan, and I'd just like to add that in an environment where these major providers are linked through outcome structure, it may make sense to multiple providers to have somebody in the role of a DRC. Somebody who's focusing on resource coordination, somebody who is an expert on the different procedural models that the partners are using. Your value as a DRC might increase significantly in such an environment. That's kind of what we're trying to hint at. Now, marketing that is something that you and your state lead are going to understand better than we are, as far as what the local environment is and the local progress around the implementation of WIOA, because that varies quite a bit from place to place. But I think it's a safe statement to think that somebody in the role, a DRC type role, could be very, very valuable in a service delivery environment like it looks like WIOA might shape up to be. So that's a way to look at it too.
Great. Miranda, I'm going to ask a question. Is it possible to share the PowerPoint with the notes section? Some people have asked because some parts were cut out. Is that possible to do that?
Certainly. We could also take a look at the transcript and make sure it's in there as well. I can go ahead and bring up the version with the notes.
Okay. And while she does that, and then after for people to download, if you're not able to download it, please reach out to any of us. And I do want to remind you, and it's very much appreciated as you exit today, please do take a moment to fill out the post-webinar survey and respond to the questions and especially the comments. It's very important to us. We do read and follow that, and it's very helpful for us as we create new trainings to make sure that they are effective and they are addressing your support needs. So you see the other PowerPoint there that does have the notes section. And
those notes are pretty extensive because I have to give credit to my colleague, Brian. You'll see most of what you missed on my line cutting out. Sorry about that, folks. I will go give my telecommunication provider a hard time now.
And she will. So thank you, and again, thank you all for joining us today, spending your afternoon, and for identifying, I love all the hands that were raised, seeing the benefit of your role in WIOA. So we will continue to support that as we move forward. As Miranda said, we will be sharing, if not tomorrow, early next week, our trainings for August, and they will focus on the asset development component, which, as all of them do, tie into the other ones. So thank you for joining us. Thank you, Miranda and Brian, and enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.
Please fill out the post-training survey. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.